being in Michigan, and where I used to get beat up a lot, foster care is really a deep, deep emotional story. But after finally, like, you really break away from the socialization of life after you go through so much psychological trauma. So, you know, it appears that some of us are barbarian, but we're not. We're just on survival mode. And we really need to be loved back to humanity or the norm. So in not caring about anything, I said, you know, the TV makes New York seem 24 hours exciting, so I came here.
I'm Kate Barnhart. I'm the Director of New Alternatives for LGBT Homeless Youth. We're here at our Christopher Street Drop-In Center. We offer a range of services including hot meals, clothing, hygiene supplies. We have a food pantry, a big Sunday night dinner where we serve a hot meal for about 50 young people. We provide case management, counseling, crisis intervention. We have a lawyer who goes to court if our young people get arrested, tutors who work with young people.
Were you ever homeless? Or do you know someone who has been a homeless teen?
Yeah, when I was younger, I used to kind of run with a lot of kids that would either run away from home just as a self-liberation issue, or they were having familial problems, I guess I would say, and they ran away. But I've never had the experience myself being homeless and young, fortunately.
Yes, I've never been homeless, but I knew a few families that were growing up.
Damn, that's a real question. No.
Yeah, I was homeless for a time, and like my family was. So yeah, I've experienced homelessness, and I know quite a few people that have, all of them queer. So yeah, I know about homelessness intimately.
Yeah, actually. I've lived with a friend before because I found out they were homeless. Or really, I had them move in as one of my roommates because I found out it was hard for them to find a space. They were definitely queer, they're actually trans. I've been homeless before. Not like super on the streets, but definitely not like a definite place to stay. Yeah, I mean, housing is hard to find for a lot of people who don't have the means to acquire it, on top of, you know, the issue of them being queer, so.
Well, I was born in Michigan. When I was 6 years old, I went into foster care, and I've been institutionalized, and I've been to tons of different shelters and programs and institutions ever since.
It's complicated. Queer folks, like POC queer folks, I want to be more specific about that. POC queer folks, I think have a lot less access to wealth or any type of economic safety net, and I think that contributes to homelessness.
My partner came from a pretty poor family and was in an abusive household, and my partner's mom is disabled, so because of being poor, she couldn't really leave the household, and it wasn't possible for her to make a safe situation at home, and she eventually encouraged my partner to leave, and so that meant that my partner was homeless, but that was better than the situation that they had been in.
There is a lot of employment discrimination that our young people face. I mean, first of all, it's hard for young people to get jobs at all. The youth unemployment rate in the United States is fairly high to begin with. And then most of our youth are people of color, and so they face discrimination on that front. And then you add into the fact that they're gay, lesbian, or gender non-conforming, and especially the transgender youth have a really hard time finding work because people may accept them as the gender they present as, but then when they get the job and they have to show their documentation, people realize that their original gender is not the same as the gender they're living as, and that creates a lot of problems. So unfortunately, a fair number of our young people wind up getting involved in illegal activities to make money, or they panhandle, or they wind up involved in sex work.
Should there be programs that specifically target homeless youth who identify as LGBTQ?
I think there very much needs to be LGBT-specific shelters because the mainstream shelters are really unsafe for LGBT people. Right now there are LGBT-specific shelters for people under the age of 24, but once you're over the age of 24, there are no LGBT-specific adult shelters, and a lot of LGBT adults, or even, like slightly older young adults, have wound up in very unsafe situations because of that. I've seen a lot of our trans women go through a huge amount of discrimination and harassment in the adult women's shelters. And it's really not necessarily even the other women, but it's the staff that cause the problems.
Is this true? Where are these questions coming from? It's an age limit on homelessness. Huh. This country is fucked up. How about that?
I think that there should be specialized programming because the issues definitely change on sexual kind of, when you take into account sexual identity, the issue definitely does shift, and the conversations that are had are a lot more sensitive to the individual, and I think that you need to be in a space that supports who you are in that sensitive time.
Absolutely, I think it's a larger issue for the LGBTQ youth population, so there should definitely be programs specifically targeted towards helping that population.
No, I don't think there should be separate programs at all. I think that would make LGBTQ youth different. It perpetuates the idea of other. There's nothing different about an LGBTQ individual than any other individual except for, who that person wants to engage in a romantic and sexual relationship with, or a gender identity. I think even in terms of like protected classes that, that sexuality should be protected the same as gender and race, and you don't separate boys and girls, you don't separate, racial differences in homeless youth. Why would you separate sexuality?
When you experience homelessness, there's a lot of vulnerability that goes along with it, and LGBT homeless youth statistically experience more violence, more like sexual violence specifically, and I think that having a center that focuses on their needs is a really good thing.
I don't want to, let's say, die and then someone throw me a visual, but yet you passed me up 20 times on the street when I asked you for a quarter. If it's really about human rights, then be the change you want to see in the world. Everybody don't have the same walk of life. It's not just go get a job. That's just not what life is. It's not. Religion doesn't teach that. Science doesn't teach that. Life is bigger than just go get a job. It's so much more than that. And when you're not coming from a background of love, people can turn out many ways. So what I've learned is that there are no really bad people. It's just people we have to love a little bit more. And I know it's hard to perceive someone who seems, where he knew he had punched her or he knew that he shot him. He's not on the same psychological place that you're on. So we really have to return the love back to the world. Whatever gender, class, race you are, we have to love one another.
I think it's mostly a donation type of situation. Funding is a little bit hard. I think ideally most people want to fund these kinds of things, but the kinds of people that are the most gung-ho about it tend to not have the money they need all the time to donate to these causes perpetually. So I think it's really about constant donation of goods. Most of the time, you know, you do need money to go toward housing, but we need to either start coming together and helping fundraise in a grassroots way, like within communities going, I don't know, even having small things like bake sales or auctions, especially a lot of, you know, LGBTQ persons of color especially tend to come into themselves as artists or open themselves up through that kind of medium, I feel. So auctioning off work or having things like that that are more focused on proceeds going to help people like them who are more destitute, I think would be great. But I think also donation of goods, you know, food drives, clothing drives, things like that. Because at the end of the day, aside from shelter, they need to take care of themselves inside as well, or you know, they won't be able to survive.
I know about California. I know a lot of people come through that program, but that's also kind of the go-to, at least here. And so in terms of, you know, but there's also a lot of organizations that do housing work, whether it's folks who are seeking housing as a result of violence that they've dealt with in all sorts of forms. So I wonder if there are other conversations to be had with other organizations currently providing housing to think about how their services could be expanded. And I don't think I know any other programs in New York that do housing specifically for LGBTQ folks, but I hope that we can really have that conversation because it's such a big issue for young people, queer and trans people of color in particular, and so the need is certainly there.
One thing that my partner and I have considered in the future fostering an LGBT child, just because yeah, we do think that that's a unique set of experiences and challenges, and particularly, at least my partner can understand some of the challenges of homelessness, and both of us understand being LGBTQ, so hopefully that is something that would make us more relatable to the child.
Well, I think one of our big success stories is Vincenzo, who is a trans man, and when he came to us, he had come to New York City from a small town in Florida, and he had come here to go to the School of Visual Arts. And when he got to New York, he felt comfortable enough to begin his gender transition. And when he came out to his family, they completely rejected him and cut off all ties. And they also cut off his support for school, so he wasn't able to continue at the School of Visual Arts. And since he was living in student housing, he lost his housing. And he couldn't go back home, so he was stuck on the street. And when he came to us, he was really like emotionally devastated. He just felt like his life was over. And so we worked with him a lot in counseling and got him into an LGBT shelter. And then we worked with him on applying to school as an independent student. And he wound up getting into Hampshire College in Massachusetts. And he just graduated from there this past June. And he's now in the process of applying to graduate school.
One of the best things I like about New Alternatives is that, and it really focuses on this, is the social skills. Because I really think that people look over that they think just because you're alive and you're physically working, that psychologically you should match up to the standards of how living is. New Alternatives really gives you a reason to live. You know, it really gives you, like, it tells you why, you know, because people love you. It's just like, you know, for that one little moment, you just feel like someone cares about your existence again. I know it gets so hard when you don't know where you're going to go or where you're going to sleep. And it's like, how can you focus on religion when your basic needs aren't met? How can you focus on a job when your basic needs aren't met? How can you focus on doing anything that a typical person overlooks when your basic needs aren't met? You know, it's like when someone walks up to me, they say, well, why don't you just get a job? You know, we're so far apart in consciousness. He can't even see me. You can't even see me. They think homelessness is a financial dependency. It's not. Poverty is in the mind. And I'm not saying I'm poor in the mind, but I'm saying that you have to rebuild yourself psychologically. before you can just walk into some establishment. You won't be able to operate. So I'm saying, just guard your mind, you know, because that's all we have left.